It's a minute before 1. TolkienScholars.org on YouTube.com/TolkienScholars. It is August 19th, 2017. Waiting for our Tolkien Society members to show up. We are an official smile of the UK Tolkien Society. Last month we had our annual convention, Tolkien Moot. More information on TolkienMoot.org or on YouTube.com/TolkienMoot. Just getting things set up here. Got a new laptop, so having to set up all the configurations again and such. So bear with me. And again, we're waiting for people to show up, and then we will go through our meeting notes from the last 2 months, actually, and be watching. Oh, here we go. People showing up. Enter.
I'm Mark.
Maya Govanen. By the way, we're on the air.
Oh, are we?
Yep, because it's 1 o'clock, so.
Should have come in a bit earlier then.
Nope, you're fine. You're exactly on time, so. I was just telling whatever audience we end up with that, just waiting for folks to arrive. And I need to test the stream to make sure we actually do have audio working, because sometimes it tricks me. Because it's tricksy. It can be false. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I was
good to see you again.
I was enjoying your the sound of your pond out here in.
Oh yeah, my waterfall.
Yeah, a little waterfall. At the angle I was sitting at, it looked very hobbitish.
Yes, it is very enjoyable. Let's see. This might not be the best one to test it with.
It's quite a beautiful day today in the 80s.
Yeah, though the smoke is starting to come back, which has me concerned. I wish it would not. But other than that, yes, quite nice. I better try with another laptop, because this one's... Well, I'm still setting this one up. It's a replacement for my ROG, because my ROG was 6 years old and taking a beating and starting to have all kinds of problems. But this one is not set up yet, so...
I have no idea what you mean by ROG, but that's okay.
Asus Republic of Gamers.
Oh, okay.
It's a high end. It's the big beefy one I've usually had. That, here. Big thick one. So.
Well, I left a message with you.
I did get it. I didn't get to listen to all of it because I've been juggling, but okay, good. Oh wait, no. That's not live. That's not the live stream. Good to me. Look at the live stream. That's live. Why isn't it?
I really wish I had some kind of computer experience. I feel bad.
Tolkien Scholars. Where is it taking me to? Tolkien Scholars. Should be showing that. It says live now. But on this computer, it is not. How strange. Dealing with browser incompatibilities here, I think. This is why I have to test these things.
Testing.
Yeah, we're streaming, but I'm not confident the audio's working yet.
So you saying I should start my talking in sign language? Is that what we should be doing?
You gonna come to the sign language group right after this? Because I run the weekly sign language group.
Oh no, I was a sign language interpreter for a short period of time.
Come to our study group. We need you. We need you. Because Katie and I got really rusty. I used to be pretty competent. I was never an interpreter level, but I was pretty.
Well, I was never
conversational.
technically an interpreter level, but yeah.
But I was pretty conversational, and then about 5 years ago when I got really sick, I had to stop doing stuff for a couple of years there. And so we've been, for the past year, trying to rebuild back up, but we keep getting almost all beginners.
Well,
And
I
so
wouldn't
we're
be.
like forever doing that.
Well, I'm pretty rusty myself.
Yeah, but we've got one person who's been coming. We're afraid we're going to lose her because she's pretty advanced, and so we need more advanced people, even if they're rusty, to come and help. So, because we start out at the beginning of the meeting beginner, finger spelling, and then basic vocabulary. But as the meeting progresses, it gets to where we're doing full stories and conversation.
Right.
And so we want it to be full 2 hours so that all levels can show up at the right time. That's how it used to be. But we're having trouble because the advanced signers show up and we get all these beginners and they won't stick around so that we get enough advanced signers for the second half so we can all raise our level.
Right.
And we used to get the deaf community coming too. I used to pack at the place. I used to get like 70 people.
You guys don't get enough experience points to level up. Is that
Exactly.
what you're saying?
Exactly. After having them revoked over time. Exactly. Man, that's weird.
Are we still having trouble with audio?
Well, no, audio may be perfectly fine. I just don't. I'm not able to test it because the laptop doesn't want to show the screen. Microsoft Edge or whatever, because I just set this laptop up. This is for, we're having multiple systems set up for Neverwinter Nights for therapy and education, because we can, with Neverwinter Nights, we can create our own modules to work with different populations. And we can, as real-time Dungeon Master, the video game, because they give you all the tools of Neverwinter Nights to do that. It's the only game that I know of that ever did that. And so these are older systems, but they're new. They're new systems, warranties, but they're older hardware. So they're cheap. And I've been trying to set up the network so that I can have our volunteers learn how to use this.
You have so much on your plate, and you just, man,
Yeah.
you know.
Yesterday I was at Spark Central, trying to run an intro to Adventures in Middle Earth.
Well, I guess you were at Spokane, I guess.
Last weekend, all 3 days at Spokane.
Well, the guy that runs my apartment building said that he saw you, and he was telling me all about how he had met you, and he didn't really know that you and I had already.
Yeah. What did he say? Hope it wasn't
he,
too bad.
He was a little impressed that I knew you.
Oh, yeah. What did he have to say?
He thought you were pretty cool to get to chat with and everything.
Right.
So
Who was he?
Now the name goes out of my head. Jake. He works for the Phoenix. It's downtown apartment building for people in transitional housing. So, anyways, he's a big gamer, role playing gamer, and he's we're always talking about role playing games because I'm doing a weird science fiction thing with Richard, and then he's doing like regular Dungeons and Dragons kind of stuff, and so we get to talking about silly things that can happen.
And this is Tolkien related because I was running yesterday Eves of Mirkwood with Adventures in Middle Earth, so we're not completely tangential there. And you did say Brian was going to be a little late, and Richard couldn't make it because he's not feeling well.
Yeah, Richard said he couldn't.
So it might just be us.
Well, and then
so that means I better start reading the meeting notes.
Well, I mean, I could read them, but I don't know. I didn't know.
We've got 2 months, so how about we split them? How about you read June and I'll read July, because that's July is Tolkien Moot and I can fill in. Do you have?
I don't have any of them. I didn't think about printing them off. I didn't realize it was going to be only us two.
Let me get this. Just let me verify that that we're not just pantomiming silent films here.
We'll go back and dub.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Right. Figure out everything we said through lip reading.
No. It's like the Vulcan language. It's not about to.
But if we start signing, that would help our deaf community, right? Yeah. So that's good. Since I can't remember since, but you. Well, let's see. During since you and I can both sign. Hi. Welcome to signing Tolkien Society? Does that work? I know this is system.
I think, yeah.
You got
Just like group and
class, family. Why not society?
Yeah,
Sure,
yeah.
why not?
Why not? We don't know.
Let's see if this one. No, something's not right. It's not showing.
See how it is? I come the one day I come back and everybody's gone and the system's acting up. I sometimes wonder if I'm giving off some weird vibes here.
God. It's all my fault.
No, you can't. You're not like. Never mind.
What?
Oh, the guy from Jurassic Park. He was never machine compatible. I'm not sure how machine compatible I am.
Okay.
He was causing his. He always thought the machines would always go on the fritz when he was around.
It does seem like there are people like that sometimes.
I'm not sure that I'm one of them, but
Google just fractures things so much. It's so frustrating.
it's the spirit of Tolkien. This advanced technology.
Broadcast. Oh, there, now it's showing up.
Did it work?
Well, let's see if we can hear it. Let's make sure I'm not muted. There, now it's showing up. Okay, so we do have audio confirmed. Now,
Maybe with a
a
small
whole
lag.
10 minutes into this, we can start doing our meeting notes. So here, I'll give you one you can read from, and then we'll switch to July. So Tolkien scholars.
So Brian put quite a bit of effort into going over Tolkien Moot. He wrote out all the notes. I heard that he did that. That's pretty impressive. Since I don't think you guys actually wrote anything down while you were actually talking to
Yeah, we were probably
Martinez.
Probably a little too busy.
Yeah.
It was great. And by the way, if you want to catch the previous Tolkien Moot with guest scholar essayist Michael Martinez, check it out on tolkienmoot.org. Okay, so here, if you want to start with, you're actually going to start lower down because it is June. Okay, come here. All right. Battery's fully charged, so you can.
Alrighty.
Let's hand this to you and just start from where the arrows
I
are.
wish I was able to do a Brian impression.
Oh. What would that be? I haven't thought about impersonating him.
Notes for the June meeting of the how do you pronounce that?
Ea. I liked Ea, that's what I thought it was, but the Finnish folk in Finland corrected us and it's Ea. Yeah, which is
Tolkien
not
Society of the Inland Northwest. We're at Hawk's house, and we were last time. We were downstairs as well. We just discussed some administrative. This is from June. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, we want you to do June first.
Okay,
We're
right.
gonna do
That
June,
wasn't
and then
Tolkien Moot. You're
right.
gonna
This
read
is the
that.
month before, and then I will read July's.
On July 15th, our Tolkien Society meeting will be held in the midst of Tolkien. Okay. The society will meet at 1 p.m. as usual. Just a rehash to tell about Tolkien. Discussion of Amazon's products, purchase of Whole Foods, one-stop shop idea. This oddly connects to making it both easier and harder to acquire books. Knowing where to look is easier, but rare book dealers online, such as Aid Books, have a hard time surviving. As we discussed. Yes. We segued to H.G. Wells and his role-playing game Little Wars and discussed how...
war game. Did he say role-playing game?
Yes,
No,
sorry.
it's not a
Role-playing game.
It's not a role-playing game. It's a war game.
Right, it was the giant,
It's
right,
the predecessor.
like the ones they used to use in Napoleon.
They use miniatures and everything, yeah.
And discussed how Wells set the stage for later role playing games,
Right.
wargaming, industrialization led to greater leisure time, therefore made RPGs possible. Hawk gave a potted history of role-playing evolution. Follow-up question for July: did Tolkien and H.G. Wells ever meet? I don't think so.
Yeah, we didn't hear from anybody, and I didn't have time to research everything else going on. We
Well-
still have that open question: did Tolkien and H.G. Wells ever meet, or write, or anything interact in any way?
Well, if I remember correctly, Chesterton and H.G. Wells were friends during his time alive, and so I don't know. I think H.G. Wells would have been pretty old by the time Tolkien came along. If they ever did communicate, Tolkien would have been quite a younger man at the time. Brian read May notes for our smile.
Yep,
Right.
smile, yep.
How do I move down a little bit? Okay, there we go. Hawk read Tolkien's letter 140 discussion points. Name of the 3 volumes of The Lord of the Rings. He preferred The War of the Ring as the title of the last volume to not give away The Return of the King prematurely. And yet he was, somehow we end up with something completely different. The 2 towers. Tolkien seemed to have intended ambiguity and mystery about which towers these are, although he suggests the best pairs. Compare with George R.R. Martin and fans knowing where the story's going.
We were having a conversation about it. Yeah. Again, you can check out all this broadcast on our YouTube channel.
So yeah, George R.
R.
Yeah. Our group did some checking in to see when Tolkien gives away Aragorn's true identity. It's in the Council of Elrond, but it doesn't state Aragorn's intent to return and rule as Isildur's heir until his sword is remade and he takes up Isildur's authority in the paths of the dead. Was there ever any... Peter Jackson portrays that as he wasn't certain about his authority or his place as king. Was that ever put in Tolkien? Was that ever implied that,
Yeah, it was
that he
implied.
had some uncertainty about being king?
Well,
about
that he didn't
taking
feel
up the-
worthy. He didn't feel worthy, and he worried that he would inherit his ancestors' curse of succumbing to the ring and things like that.
Oh, okay.
So he had his doubts. That's part of why he wouldn't take up the mantle that he resisted for so long.
So what was it about the making of the sword that made it such a big deal?
The reforging of the sword.
Yeah. What
Well,
brought
it was a working heirloom rather than an archival thing sitting there to be looked at. It was symbolic that what was broken was working again, was together again.
Right. So the line of the kings was broken, and
Right.
he's kind of
mending that. And remember, he had to go get the sapling of the white tree that was part of his proving
which
his
was hidden.
kingship. Because the problem is, if he just showed up without proof and he just was a wild ranger out of the north, who's going to believe him? Right? Some guy off the street suddenly shows up and says, "I'm king." Right. They're coming to take you away. Ha 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 hee hee.
Well,
So he
they
needed to
didn't-
have all the proof possible.
Well, was Boromir kind of
Well,
like in the movie was a little hesitant to accept him as king, anyways?
Right. Well, I mean, he once he was convinced, he was like, "No, you need to come lead our people. We have been fighting this battle, losing battle forever. You need to come and inspire our people." So it was again in Peter Jackson. He made it more insidious.
Right.
Than,
Okay. Well, number 7, or what? Moving on, we
Yep.
chose to read selections from Christopher Tolkien's latest edited work of his father, Baron and Luthien, was published at the beginning of June. I want that book.
Yes. Yes.
We read parts of the preface. We then read the overall synopsis of the story in the notes on the Elder Days. Note on Dorthorion.
Dorthonian.
Christopher Lee sang Treebeard's Song of the Seasons. Yes,
Mhm.
Christopher Lee's voice is amazing. Christopher, there's a couple links. Christopher Lee reading Huron, Michael Flowers' Worthwhile Post, Edith Tolkien's Dance that inspired Luthien. It was posted. And
So there's a link to that. So we made references in the previous broadcast, and in our meeting notes are the links to those references.
Right. And so on to
TolkienScholars.org.
on to Tolkien
13.
Right.
All right,
In
Tolkien
July.
13.
You,
Lengthy notes.
oh.
Okay, Tolkien Moot, and it was also our monthly meeting because they correspond to the same weekend. Now we've got everything
Right.
synced up the third weekend of July, third Saturday of each month. We were at my residence here downstairs. We had Hawk, Richard, Wesley, Stephanie, Brian, Mercy, Irene, and the whole Tolkien Moot crew. There's a photo. We had about 25 people during the peak there. So there are many others, but those are ones that have been, here in the group before. I gave an introduction, Tolkien Moot 13, to our audience and online listeners, as well as our special guest, author and blogger and Tolkien essayist Michael Martinez, a noted Tolkien scholar in his own right. After the welcome, Brian read notes from the June meeting. Oh, well, I guess we did cover them, but I think they weren't posted, so it's good that we recovered them. There was a general discussion about the notes. Number 4, I traced out the story arc of last year's Tolkien Moot and into this year. Tolkien Moot 12 was Undying Love. This year's theme was Rescue in Mordor. And to rescue an elf from the prisons of Mordor.
Which I enjoyed immensely. I had never
Good.
got to test out the One Ring mechanics, and I thought that it was superior in some ways to a lot of the role-playing games that I've played.
It's got a lot going for it. Adventures in Middle-earth, AIM is Tor bolted on top of D&D 5th edition. And it does a good job of toning down D&D 5th edition to be more appropriate. The adventure takes place in Third Age 2949, around the same time that Gandalf and Balin visited the Shire, between the events detailed in The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings. The pre-adventure began in Dunland or Rohan, just after vanquishing the witch last year. The heroes swore an oath to find her elvish love, imprisoned in Dol Guldur by the Necromancer, aka Sauron, and now likely prisoner somewhere in Mordor after the raid by the White Council. While the heroes were unable to save the Urbanine's elder son, they were able to force out the possession of Lord Urbanine's body and retrieve their newborn son. Then the heroes traveled to Edoras to retrieve Lord Thranduil Urbanine's baby, then to Lord and Lady Urbanine's manor house to return their child. The heroes go with the Lord to Minas Tirith and once again search through the archives and question various folk while waiting for an appointment with the steward. Let's see, does it detail this about the steward? So this was the steward who was the peacetime steward, and he was like 96 years old or something like that.
So this was before Boromir's dad?
This is just before Denethor.
Okay.
And so he was not happy about anybody stirring the pot because it had been peaceful all this time, but he was doomed. And it was coincidence. It was only after I did the research that everything synced up perfectly for this adventure, for the canon.
Well, it's interesting that gap of time seems very open to having a lot of possibilities.
Yeah, but we were able to use canon more than we thought we could, because it turns out the Waking of Mordor happened in sync with this, as per canon. So I was like, oh, this is perfect, wow. And it's never really explained exactly why Mordor suddenly rises up. It just says this is when Sauron, revealed himself and Mordor stirs. Well, we make it look like it's the adventurer's fault, which is beautiful. And that was a coincidence, yeah.
Because Tolkien really didn't give, he didn't leave a whole lot of gaps in his history
But
really do that kind of stuff.
In the final weeks of 2950, while the Steward scouts are searching Mirkwood and during their investigations also searching Mordor borders, the heroes uncover a spy in Minas Tirith. The spy eventually admits to having worked for the necromancer, and then after having been driven from Dol Guldur in 2941, the retinue made their way to Mordor under cover of night. The heroes successfully broker a deal and get grudging permission from the steward. They know at this point only that he was long ago a spy for the necromancer. He claims he no longer is. But in trade for his freedom, he will provide updated information about Mordor and secret paths into Mordor, and possible prison camp locations where the elf might be. But he will not provide any of these details until they're well into Ithilien. Then to Osgiliath and across to the crossroads of central Ithilien, the heroes learn that lore states there are 5 ways into the Land of Shadow. The Black Gate, the Morgul Vale, the little-known Pass of Poros, which is something we found,
Right.
the northeast edge of Mordor, or the southeast edge, then into Mordor by the route that the heroes choose. Any of these ways by the route that the heroes choose.
My group didn't do it, but did somebody actually drag the poor spy along with them through the
Not that I'm aware of.
through Poros? No.
Not that I'm aware of, because they gave their word
Okay.
that at Ithilien Crossroads they'd set them free.
Okay.
So I need to touch base with them.
I misunderstood the way you read it. It sounded like somebody took the spy with them when they went to
Only to the crossroads of Ithilien, then they're supposed to set them free.
right to the crossroads of Ithilien,
Yeah.
but he didn't say much in ours about anything about a camp being there.
No, he gave you locations where you could find the prisoner.
Well, he gave us the ability to go into Poros, but I don't think he actually told us.
Yeah,
he
he
gave
did.
a lot of different things, but there wasn't really. I don't know that he mentioned it.
Yeah, he mentioned several locations that prisoners could be, including a prison camp.
Oh, okay. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
That's okay. So then into Mordor by the route that the heroes chose, and there were multiple tables running, so different groups made different decisions. Then hopefully succeed in rescuing the prisoner from confinement, then fleeing the prison location back to the border of Mordor. It will then either end with the heroes trying to find a way out of Mordor, now roused, or if they play the extra session, escaping the confines of Mordor. Number 5, we had discussion on which route each RPG group took in the morning. The Pass of Poros was the most popular of the 5. The Pass of Poros is inferred from this map of Christopher Tolkien's, and it shows that it looks like there's a pass there. So there's the Bridge of Poros, which there's a battle that's detailed, and you follow the river up, and Christopher Tolkien did a graphical map, and it really does look like a pass right through. It's a much lower altitude than the rest of the mountains. So even though there's no name that says Pass of Poros.
Was this something of Tolkien's that was printed later?
Christopher Tolkien's. It was in, it's the zoom-in map of Southern Gondor.
Okay.
By Christopher Tolkien. So that's where we filled that in. Number 6. This led to a discussion of the relative lack of canon details of that area, except the Battle of the Crossings of Poros in 3rd Age 2885, in which the princes of Rohan were killed in helping Gondor push back the Haradrim out of South Ithilien. Number 7. Since this RPG adventure is about the return of Sauron to Mordor, all build up to the Lord of the Rings decades later, Brian asked Michael Martinez whether Mordor was intended by Sauron to parallel Dorthonian or Angband, while Sauron did have strongholds in the First Age, Tol and Gwarath, and Second Age, Temple of Morgoth, Numenor. Mordor in the Third Age was less of a stronghold and more of a self-sufficient realm, which enabled Sauron's plans of dominion. In the northwest part of Mordor, the plain of Gorgoroth was the location of smithies, factories, and his industrial might. Elsewhere along the land of Nirn, many slaves tended the vast fields which were the breadbasket of Mordor. So Mordor is not all wasteland. North part is. You go south, though, it's actually quite fertile. And that's how he feeds all his troops and everything.
Yeah, that's something that you just don't hear too much about.
Yeah, it's in there. It just, you have to do some digging. Number 8, we briefly talked about Beren and Luthien, Christopher Tolkien's swan song. He introduced no new material, but organized it into one complete whole as a tribute to his parents. Christopher Tolkien saw this story as seminal to the development of the Middle-earth legendarium, and of course the romance parallels with J.R.R. Tolkien and his wife Edith. Number 9, the other main story with such early roots in Tolkien's writing, was the fall of Gondolin. However, it is unlikely that Christopher has any new notes of his father on this epic story, which is described in several versions in both the Silmarillion and also in Finnish Tales. Number 10. A visitor read Tolkien's letter 141. This letter referred to Tolkien's. This is a Tolkien moot attendee,
right.
An unnamed attendee. Referred to Tolkien's quandary about fitting maps into Lord of the Rings, since the page would be too small to have a detailed map. Note, Tolkien had a high standard for maps, possibly because of the Ordnance Survey maps of Britain. The most detailed walking maps were 25 feet to the mile. That's really
it always
detailed.
amazed me because don't we actually know how far it is from
They're 25 inches to the mile.
Hobbiton to Bree, and even to Weathertop? I think we even know how far it is to Weathertop from Hobbiton. I'm not sure about some of the other places, but that's pretty.
But he's talking about the British Ordnance maps, 25 inches to the mile. That's very detailed for 1 mile. I referred to the annotated Middle-earth map of Pauline Baines, which had recently come to light. We have a link to that. It has Tolkien's notes written all over, making additional details that aren't normally on the maps. It was very cool. Michael asked if we had heard about the fan on which J.R. Tolkien, fan map which Tolkien allegedly wrote, "Here may be Entwives, northwest of the Sea of Rhûn." Discussion, because next year is going to be a hunt for the Entwives. So that's what you're going to be building towards, trying to find any clues on the Entwives. It's going to be a tough one.
I was going to say, that's tough.
That's a really tough one. And we may also involve Tom Bombadil, because everybody voted different ones and they're popular, and so try to merge the top ones.
Tom Bombadil.
Well, he would
That'll be
a
an
good resource for
interesting.
trying to find out where the Entwives might have gone, if you can get a straight word out of him.
Yeah, if he wasn't
If you
so.
can find him.
Isn't he kind of? Didn't they kind of imply that Tom Bombadil, if he had the ring, he would more or less lose it somewhere because he's not
Remember,
really.
he tried. It didn't do anything for him.
Well, right, but he would just.
Yeah, he'd be
wouldn't-
absent-mindedly.
He'd be
yeah.
absent-mindedly
Because he
lose
just
it
doesn't
somewhere.
care. Yeah. Many ideas suggested for Tolkien Moot 14 in 2018: Entwives, Bombadil, Fall of Gondolin, Religions of Middle-earth, the Palantiri, Middle-earth from an Orcish point of view, and Dragons. Highest votes were for Entwives, 12, Bombadil 8, and the Fall of Gondolin 8. So I don't know if we can do the Fall of Gondolin, but we can do Entwives, Bombadil, and Religion, and a few others that people like the idea. Venue for next year probably will not be Hawksheath. Hopefully Bozarth Mansion in a couple of years will be really nice.
What?
The
What?
Bozarth Mansion.
The Bozarth?
Yeah, it's
What is
this gorgeous 1912 two-door style, just estate, and it's owned by Gonzaga, and they rent it out for weddings and other things, and you can get it for all 3 days for like $4,000, and it has like 45 dorm rooms, and
You're gonna pay
interior you can have 100 people, exterior you can have 200 people. It's just absolutely gorgeous.
Are you looking at $4,000?
Yeah, a few years ago, before I got sick, we did put money down. I put $1,000 down on it, and we were going to do it. And then I got so sick I couldn't run it, so we had to back out. Now, normally they don't give you back your deposit, but because it was a medical thing, they were kind enough to give us back our money. Michael put $500 down, I put $500 down, and we were trying to get other people to donate.
Oh, okay.
So, and if we ever form a 501c3, they could make it even cheaper, because for other nonprofits, they make it even cheaper.
Sweet.
So it's the dream. Someday we'll do Tolkien Moot. And it's just up the street from here. It's gorgeous. It's just a few walks from here.
You got your own butler? Do you
Well,
get your own butler with
but
you?
it's got its own kitchen. It's got a really full functional kitchen, everything industrial
That way
grade.
people aren't trying to squeeze in to
It's
sneak
just,
a piece of pizza.
it's really nice. We'll have to, one of these society meetings, we'll have to see if we can pop in there. And it's gorgeous. There's photos on the website from our tour.
So you're trying to bribe us by showing us a preview of what might come, right?
It is perfect. It is 1912. It's so perfect for a Tolkien gathering.
It sounds beautiful.
It is. It really is. But so that's a couple of years out, but we hope someday to do that. Number 15, our meetings are always on the third Saturday of the month from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. Our next meeting scheduled for August 19th from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. at Hawks House. Here we are. Respectfully submitted by the Secretary of the Smile, Brian Huseland. Thank you, Brian, in absentia. We appreciate that.
He shall return.
You said he'll be here midway through, right?
Yeah, he said 2 o'clock he should be
Okay,
here.
all right. So let's see, we did letter 140 back in June, so it's going to be something shortly after that.
Well, I was going to discuss with you.
Yes, please.
Because I never did. I do have a couple of books here that I
Excellent.
I think you've probably heard of him, John Warwick Montgomery. He was known in the 60s as a Tolkien scholar, and he put together a number of collected essays that had to do with C.S. Lewis, Tolkien, Chesterton, so on and so forth. I don't know how appropriate this would be, because I think the only essay that's in there that I really think of worth some time is more philosophical but I did have a book called More Than Words from Philip Yancey, who actually has Stephen Lawhead writing about Tolkien, his encounter with his writings, and I think it's about 6 pages, I think.
Okay.
And I don't know if we want to wait and put it off till Brian gets here, because
Probably.
Brian was really interested in
Yeah, save that for that.
And so, so I kind of I should have called you earlier in the week about it, but I didn't think about it. I didn't know how well I would be feeling by the weekend, so.
Oh, you just recovered from a bug?
Well, I kind of, something like that.
Okay. An illness. And then Brian created a great poem, and he forwarded it to me and might put it to music. It's Brian's Song of the Woodmen.
Ooh.
So I might recite that if you would like, because it's really good. The imagery is excellent, and the meter is very good.
So we make sure that Brian's here, even in spirit.
Exactly. It's a fairly long piece, but it's well worth it. Now, by the way, when we first played the One Ring role-playing game and did the Marsh Bell, Brian kept a journal of everything, and then he converted it into kind of an Anglo-Saxon meter, like Beowulf-type meter, the entire adventure, all 4 parts of the Marsh Bell adventure, and everything that happened, he did it all in poetic form, and that's on our website as well.
Well, that's impressive.
It is really impressive. We forwarded that to the creators of the One Ring, Francesco Nepitello, and he loved it. He just thought that was great. It was really great. And maybe I'll put that to music someday as well.
I was an English major for a short period of time, and I can tell you that trying to mimic Beowulf is not easy.
No. Well, I don't think he did like an exact. I think he just did an approximation that was, but yeah, he really did a nice job with it. And then, let's see. In this game that we ran yesterday, we ran at Spokane as well, the Eves of Mirkwood. So this Eves of Mirkwood just came out, and it's an intro of Adventures in Middle-earth that somebody's never role-played before, or somebody's played 5th edition and never did a Tolkien game before. And it's meant to just be about 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours. So it's great as an intro. And part of it is they have a feast with some dwarves, and the dwarves break into song. And there's a poem in there, a song in there, that it looks like they made for the game, and it's interesting. And actually, I've been doing it in a cappella style, singing it. And so at Spokane, when Danielle was running the group, she turned to me and I had to sing it in front of the group and stuff. So.
Sometimes I wish we had a pub sometime for those moments, so you could at least.
Well, it was the trailer. We were in the trailer. It's a very comfortable, cozy environment. So I'm pulling up that.
Well, it's so reminiscent of the English singing in the pubs.
Right. Exactly.
Of Tolkien's time.
This was a kind of dwarf. I mean, it was a campfire and they were having a feast, but it would be totally appropriate.
Chesterton used to joke about the English having the public house, they called it, right?
Right.
Where it was just called the pub, and he says that it was necessary for the people to have the pub. He said it was the only place where men could come together in comradeship and have discussions, and he always said that the book Beer and God was probably the most holy book that was ever written.
Okay, so we'll if you want, I can do this one here. I won't go full singing, but I'll do it sing-song. But it's a short piece, so this is supposed to be So the setup is, get this to expand. I like my ROG better. Alright, so after several cups of ale have been enjoyed, and the dwarves have asked the company to tell some of their stories, Har will produce his drum, and Bori his whistle, so Bowron and a like Irish whistle.
Irish whistle.
They strike up a tune, and Har sings this tune. Excuse me. The mountain was... yeah, there we go.
What?
The mountain was young, the valley green, such a place they'd never seen. They came from far, they came from wide, with hammer and pick they delved inside. When Durin's folk carved open a door to the riches lying neath Erebor. A many pillared halls of stone they'd mined and dug out their new home. The delver dug, the pick gave sound, rubies, emeralds, opals found. When Durin's folk carved open a door to the riches lying neath Erebor. A sturdy hearth, a golden throne, plates of gold, thick walls of stone, a row of warriors stout and proud, good for battle, heads unbowed. The dwarves in battle. When Durin's folk carved open a door to the riches lying neath Erebor. None heard his wings, none felt his breath, but a hot north wind brought with it death. The lintel broke, the stone floor cracked, the treasures of heath and home were sacked. When Durin's folk carved open a door to the riches lying neath Erebor. Not so happy at the end.
Now, you said this was actually out of the game, or was this...
This is out of the game. There's no music, it's just the lyrics. So I just improvised the...
Well, you did a good job.
Thank you.
I don't know if I would...
But yeah, this is in the game, Eves and Mirkwood from Adventures in Middle-earth intro adventure by Cubicle 7.
So is the exact author name for the music? You know.
Let's see if
they don't.
So written by John Hodgson, designed by, creative direction by John Hodgson, art by John Hodgson, edited by and Francesco Neptello, graphic design, and layout, maps, proofreading. Yes, I guess John Hodgson, or but it doesn't say other than that. That's the person who wrote it.
Do you feel like the purist would be a little bit up in arms about it, or would?
I don't. I think he does a good job. I think that's a pretty true to the spirit, don't you?
Yeah, I do.
It's dwarves making a song about what happened at Erebor. I don't know. What do you folk think online? What do you think of that? I think he did a good job with it, and again, they have the license, so they can do such things. So this I'm not going to try to sing, but this is the rhyme by Brian Huseland, 2017, Song of the Woodman. In ancient times, three folk began, the elves, the dwarves, and the race of man. Beckoned by light, alive in the west, they came by sunset paths to rest. The blessed Bema and his steed Nahar was hunting our forests by light of star. Then darkness grew and sought to curse the goodness of this middle earth. Thus first division of the brave, elf friend or shadow slave, banners of houses noble and sure, Beor, Haleth, and Hador they were. Much lore is lost of the times back then, when our folk were cloven once again. Many men to Westerness left, and Middle Earth was long bereft of heroes to fight against the dark. All was wild, yet ears would hark to hunting horns in village halls, where fires warmed and story scrawls its glorious deeds on wooden walls. I think I'll leave the rest for when Brian is here, but that's the first stanza, and there are 3 stanzas. So, good imagery though, huh? It covers history, but with a nice imagery.
Well, yeah, I'm not a poet, but it's definitely has a very similar. I don't know what I want to say. It's not exactly like Tolkien, but it's got a flavor that is very close to you know, a modern kind of Beowulf kind of thing.
This isn't the one that he did after.
Oh,
this is one he just did recently.
I thought.
No, the Beowulf one is really, really long.
Oh
well. it would take us probably the whole meeting to read through it all. It seems.
Well, it still sounds. It sounds a lot like. I feel like it's true to the spirit and the fact that Brian and you are near repositories of information sometimes when it comes to the Tolkien stuff. At least he has something to base it off of.
Oh yeah,
you know, it's hard to.
Well, and part of it has been from gaming. It makes you delve in deeper than you would just from normal reading and such, and it makes you hypothesize things. That makes you find out things you never might have thought of otherwise. It really does lead to a whole other level of depth. So I'm trying to find where we put his.
Well, he did an excellent job GMing. There was a
little
bit.
He did do a good job.
He did a lot. There was a bit of a rush at the end, I think, because of how close the time was.
Yeah, that happens. You know, remember Tolkien normally was 3 days, but we trimmed it down to one until we've got more resources again.
Right. Well, so he's written 2 poems. You said the one off Beowulf and this one.
Well, no, it's the one. It's not the one off of Beowulf, but it's in the style.
It's the same
but
style.
It was of the whole adventure from years ago, from like 6 years ago. It's called The Marsh Bell. It's the introductory adventure for the One Ring role-playing game.
Oh, okay.
And so he wrote all of that in poetic style.
What does he teach?
Math,
doesn't he?
He's an elementary school teacher at Northwest Christian.
Right, in the
4th grade or something like that. He teaches all of the subjects.
Oh, he does? Because
he teaches history and spelling.
I must have misunderstood. We have a friend in common, Troy Burns. Anyways, is a friend of both of us. But it's interesting that he does that. I didn't realize. I thought he was more of a math teacher, but
yeah, I don't think so. I could have misunderstood, but.
Well, all I can say is he seems to be well-read, or at least, you know, I don't know too many people that run around writing their own English poetry.
Yeah. Oh, wow, this got some. It looks like this got some press.
The poem you just were reading?
No, the one that Brian did years ago.
The one based on.
Oh, never mind. It's just because I spread the word. You got around.
You've been advertising.
This was years ago. It ended up on. Page not found. That's not good. Oh, okay, it's on Spokane RPG is where we put it. Okay. Oh, no, hang on. Still trying to find it. My links are a little broken. Here we go. Okay, so we go to Spokane RPG, well, www.spokanerpg.com and go to the forum. There's RPG group discussions, and you will find The Tale of the Warriors 6 in. It's long. It is pages long. It's awesome.
But it looks
in 4 parts. So I'll read just a little excerpt from it, just to give you a teaser, those of you viewing. And you can view the whole game session this is based on, so you'll see the events that happened parallel this, because he did it based on the actual events.
So the game session is archived somewhere?
Yeah, it's on our YouTube channel.
Okay.
Yeah. So, so he did an Anglo-Saxon style. So, at Esgoroth, the stilted city, town on water, ship never sailing. Adventure awaited, free folk gathered. Few to the counting, yet a strong-fingered fist, to strike the shadow and gain much glory. From distant farthings hailed the Hobbitland. Short folk they are, but sure-hearted the Shire. Poppy Smallborough landed at Lake Town. found a round room at the inn river bottom. The second stranger to find our fellowship was Erland the Bardine, a man of Dale, bold in battle and keen of eye, whose blessed blood keeps no cowardice. Poor are those who dwell in Mirkwood, woodmen and women, but rich in courage. Their bows and their axes fell all foes, so Ahir Kari arrived in Esgaroth. Grimberald was next, and grim his face, yet saves his scowls for Sauron's slaves. The Bjorning bows to the Kerak keeper, and swings his blade as the Grimmer reaper. In ancient days was Esgaroth named, by elven tongues the Lake of Reeds. Now fair Linden strode in strength, wielding his wisdom and joining our throng. Last but not least was Balin the dwarf, young in his years, yet hardy are they, who live in the halls of the Mountain King, sharp as his axe and also his wit. These six assembled at the humble inn, and quickly heard the rumor storm, that hapless scouts of Durin's folk had disappeared, gloomy news, yet perfect purpose for a band of fighters. To Glóin's house we hurried, hoping honor and glory and greater riches awaited our gang. We came before the grandson of Nar, the companion of Thorin. Glóin spoke, "Find my people, for Balin the old and Owen my brother, both are missing. They are late to return from the long marsh, and the shadows lengthen. Find my kinsmen, handsome reward shall be given if your quest fulfilled." Bent then his brow, foreboding had filled him. His mind I saw his brother drowning. With haste we left him, eager to gather supplies and a boat. That evening already we rested before the early beginning. And it goes on and on and on and on. So it tells the whole story in that stuff.
I'm gonna have to check it out just to
So
find out.
SpokaneRPG.com, and then just type in Marshbell. Marshbell, M-A-R-S-H space B-E-L-L, and then you'll find it on Spokane RPG. And of course we'll have to link to it to the meeting notes when the meeting notes are made. But yeah, so that's just one of many awesome things that Brian has done. Two awesome things now that we've heard little samples of. Two awesome things. I love it. Ha ha. Let's see what else.
Do we want to read the letter? I am all for it if you feel
I'm
the.
trying to think. There were some other topics that we wanted to cover, but I think Brian. I can't remember. Yes. Brian and I have created a new website. We haven't done a whole lot with it yet other than create it. So Brian and I, for the last year and a half, to educate ourselves as to the ways of fermentation and such, have been doing what we call the world's slowest pub crawl. And so we've been checking out a different bar slash pub slash distillery for about a year and a half now, about one every month or three. Like, that's really slow.
You guys are busy.
Yeah, we are. And then we do samples of like 6 to 12 different things with those samples, and we learn all the making of and all the differences in the details, and we get them to tell us all the details. Because Brian knows a little more, but we were basically completely ignorant of all of it, and we decided we wanted to fill in that gap a little. And so for the last year, it's been all ales and beers and all of that. But then we've also recently started to check out ciders. And so day before yesterday, we went to a cider house downtown Spokane called, I've got pictures of it here. Come on. And this is still Tolkien appropriate, I think.
When you do your research, you really do it well.
We try. So let's see, and I've got pictures that I'll be uploading and such to the website. Let's see where.
So is there, we're not going to see any modern ale names in the Tolkien games anytime soon, are we?
Probably not. It's Liberty Cider Works is the name of the place downtown. There's a picture of one of the samples of 10
in a nice glass too.
Yeah, 10 different ones. So, and they have much drier selection. Let's see if that shows up properly or not. Anyway, while we were there to show Brian how to create a new website, we went ahead and created a new website and a new domain, entcrawl.com. Because we figured if we're the world's slowest pub crawl, we started to call it the Ent Crawl. Because we're not being hasty. We're taking our time.
It's a little bit.
Hum. So, entcrawl.com now is a website. Right now it's just got basic graphics and we call it entcrawl.com, Middle Earth's slowest pub crawl.
This is just like good reading. Like good reading, it takes some time.
Right.
It's not.
Savor it.
It's not a rush. You have to allow yourself to digest it properly.
Exactly.
It's not.
So we will be blogging and uploading photos as we do this. Plus, we'll try to backfill the ones we have photos from most of the other places we did over the past year and a half, and then we'll just slowly, bit by bit. Now, we are not aficionados. We are not connoisseurs of this, and we blaspheme quite a bit. So we're definitely preferring the sweeter stuff. We do not like hoppy stuff. Both of you and I agree. We do not like very hoppy things. We do not like IPAs and things like that. So.
But do you have to have a head or some foam on it? I mean, how does that work? You know, I don't know anything about these kinds of.
Yeah,
things.
well, that's exactly. We didn't know that either, so we've been learning a little bit and learning the process. But we're still total babes in the wild on this thing. And
well, it's never too late to start
right.
something
Yeah.
new.
So it's something we do when we both have a short few hours in the evening and we go try a different place each time. But yeah, entcrawl.com.
Not to get too far off the subject, but I've always thought that Butterbur, is that his name? Yes?
Yes.
Should have, I think, you know, me and Brian have talked about this, but we think he should go on an adventure. He should be there should be a role-playing adventure where Butterbur is sent on a quest for the secret spice to his recipes or something.
But he would forget halfway why he was out there.
He takes Knob with him, okay? I just think it would be pretty funny because, you know, he'd be a little Monty Python humor, you know, he trips, falls down. The sparrows are coming! The sparrows are coming!
Well, and so we've been, you know, we're doing the ales and beers and all of that, and we've been through, I don't know, 80, maybe 100 different ones in the year and a half.
Anything you got a specific taste for? Do you like?
Still kind of migrate towards Guinness, and it has to be room temperature, not cold.
Drink it like the Brits, man.
It's way better. It's really bitter when it's cold. When it's room temperature, it's a lot smoother. We came across a number of them. We've kind of semi-documented, and now we want to do more formal.
You have a scorecard, is what you're saying.
We do have. We kind of do, yeah. Like with these, we have ones we like and don't like and such. So we'll share that. And it's just for what the heck, but it's a way for us to track it because we're starting to forget. Some of them are like, we need some way to keep track. And with the website that I'm setting up, we should be able to use some apps with our phones to be able to just, when we're there, blog straight to the website and keep track that way. So we'll see how that unfolds. Another thing we're looking into besides ciders is we want to start seeing if we can find any mead. Because that's not easy to find.
Well, I was going to say something about honey, but I didn't.
Yeah.
But I've heard that's pretty sweet stuff too.
Yeah, it can be. So we're looking at different things and just check out whatever medieval style stuff. So we will slowly become less ignorant on these topics. So
I always laugh because there's actually some anthropologists out there that they found like the recipe to some, I don't remember what it was, but some ancient alcoholic drink, and you know what they have to do is, in their mind, we have to make this just to see what it tastes like.
Right, of course. It's a scientific moral imperative.
Yes.
To paraphrase Real Genius.
Well, they're not to get too far off, but we were talking about mead. Actually, there's a specific mead or something that the Irish had, I believe, that was that was kept a secret, and actually the last maker of it more or less said I would
Ancient
rather.
Irish secret, huh?
Well, I think so, but he more or less said
Oh, never
I'd
mind.
rather die than give away the secret to this concoction.
Right.
And so they killed him off, and I don't think they were able to. Anybody was able to repeat
Wow.
his success or
Wow.
something like that. So, anytime you talk about that, I always laugh because there's somebody out there always trying to figure out a way to make sure they taste history.
My
just
best
the way it
experiences
was.
with mead were from the SCA, the Society for Creative Anachronism, when they would have battles, their big gatherings after the battles. They party. They party like it's 1291 or something. I don't know. They party, and a lot of them made their own mead and such, and it was really good. Yeah. So those are my, you can get some meat at the liquor store and it's fine, but the stuff they made I really enjoyed. But it's not.
Was mead the drink that the Bjornings had, that the
I believe
dwarf
so.
strains?
That's what I believe. Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
Okay,
That's
because
why
they were
tied back to Tolkien.
big on the honey. They
Exactly.
like the honey
Well,
cakes.
especially Bjorn himself. Yes.
Yes.
Very big on the whole bee because he's a bear. Bears, honey. That's the stereotype that he was going with.
Right, but it kind of gave a yellowish. How do I put this?
Yeah, it's very yellow.
Almost, even the way they were describing him. Maybe I'm wrong, but kind of an almost golden
Yep.
feel to the room.
Oh, okay.
When the dwarves are sitting down, because between the candle wax and the lighting
Right.
and the honey cakes
Everything
and the
was kind of yellowish, golden. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, good point. Well, so I guess we could start. I mean, hopefully Brian will be here shortly.
I hope he would. Hope he's not going to be too
2
late.
o'clock. Yeah. So let's see. 140 was June. I don't know. Let's see.
I feel like you've been chatting quite a bit. Do you want me to read the letter?
Sure. Let me figure out which one we're on.
Not the big one.
No, we just passed that a few months ago. The letter. That took a while. I think it took several sessions.
How many pages was it? Like 12
17
pages?
or something. It
Oh,
was really long. I don't remember, but very long. 140, the maps. 141.
Sometimes you think that people with
Shape of the Shire.
a specific kind of skill or brilliance have a tendency to have to make up for it in other areas of their life are not quite as strong. As you've pointed out, he's not a great orator,
No.
and
no.
but it's amazing because he definitely has I don't want to call him self-involved, but he was in his head quite often.
Oh yeah. 141.
I wonder how hard it was for him to strike up a conversation with somebody and them understand what he was talking about.
Well, yeah, because he didn't want to discuss mundane stuff. He wanted to go into these deep archival discussions and literary discussions, so it could be a challenge.
Because even his fairy stories essay was sometimes a hard one to catch on to and kind of follow. And I mean,
So many references.
well, the references, but it took me 4 or 5 times to actually read a fairy story before I actually picked up on what he was trying to say. I mean,
Okay.
I don't know if it was because of the distance and time, or just the fact that he was writing about things that I had no familiarity with. But I have to say that it's not easy to just sit down and read it. Maybe you had an easier time, but
Yeah, I didn't struggle with that one. Silmarillion, 6th grade, I wasn't able to finish it, but later I did in 7th grade. I reread it. Okay, so 142. So it starts at the bottom. It's fairly long. If you want to read it part way and I'll read the other half or something like that, feel free.
142?
Yeah, letter 142, down there at the bottom right.
Okay. To Robert Murray, S.J. Father Robert Murray, grandson of Sir James Murray, the founder of the Oxford English Dictionary. Oh yes, I forgot. Tolkien was quite involved.
Yeah, for a couple of years. Well, he did what, Q and W or something like that?
Yeah, he did W because he had to come up with the word for, I think it was walrus, I think. And a close friend of the Tolkien family had read part of The Lord of the Rings. So I didn't know this. Robert Murray, grandson of Sir James Murray, the guy that started the Oxford English Dictionary, is a close Tolkien family friend. Oh wow,
Yeah.
that's a revelation.
Yeah.
Had read part of the Lord of the Rings in galley proofs and typescript, and had, at Tolkien's instigation, sent comments and criticism. He wrote that the book left him with a strong sense of a positive compatibility with the Order of Grace, and compared the image of Galadriel to that of the Virgin Mary. He doubted whether many critics would be able to make much of the book. They will not have a pigeonhole neatly labeled for it. Thank goodness we have. That's very true. So 2nd of December 1953, 76 Sanford Road, Headington, Oxford. Okay, so Robert Murray, okay, grandson, okay. My dear Rob, it was wonderful to get a long letter from you this morning. I am sorry if casual words of mine have made you labor to criticize my work, but to tell you the truth, though praise, or what is not quite the same thing, and better, but to tell you the truth, though praise, or what is not quite the same thing, and better, expressions of pleasure is pleasant. I'm not quite sure I followed that. I have been cheered, especially by what you have said this time and before, because you are more perceptive, especially in some directions, than anyone else, and have even revealed to me more clearly some things about my work. I think I know exactly what you mean by the Order of Grace, and of course by your reference to Our Lady, upon which all my own small perception of beauty, both in majesty and simplicity, is found. The Lord of the Rings is, of course, a fundamentally religious and Catholic work. Unconsciously so at first, but consciously in the revision. That is why I have not put in or have cut out practically all references to anything like religion, to cults or practices in the imaginary world, for the religious element is absorbed into the story and the symbolism. That is one thing that has always made it attractive, the Lord of the Rings. That in some ways it doesn't push a very explicit.
Yeah, it doesn't proselytize.
It is kind of weird to try to talk about humanity without religion, though. It's very, very difficult in some ways.
Confucius and others managed just fine.
Well, what I'm trying to say is, I mean, I'm kind of getting off track, but Star Trek tried really hard to avoid any religious conversation, and it ended up having to bring in characters of numerous different places that had religious tones to them. So it's kind of funny. For the religious element is absorbed in the story and symbolism. However, that is very clumsily put and sounds more self-important than I feel. For as a matter of fact, I have consciously planned very little, and should chiefly be grateful for having been brought up since I was 8, in a faith that has nourished me and taught me all the little that I know, and that I owe to my mother, who clung to her conversion and died young, largely through the hardships of poverty resulting from it. Certainly I have not been nourished by English literature, in which I do not suppose I am better read than you, for the simple reason that I have never found much there in which rests my heart, or heart and head together. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's significant, and that's why he said he wanted to create an English word mythology that you could feel that kind of connection with. Because everything else, like Arthur and such, was from the French, and then you have the Edda, which are the North, the Germanics, and not something distinctly English that had that literary.
Well, that kind of gets me a little bit because he's saying almost in some sense that he wasn't as familiar with the English writing so much as he was with like Finnish or whatever else.
Yeah.
Which means that in some ways C.S. Lewis was more read than he was in some ways.
Well, in a specific area.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Way more about these other areas.
Well, I mean,
they
he
each
was
had their areas.
Dealing with etymology. I mean, he was you know, in a stronger sense. But I would say that C.S. Lewis was probably more read in the English way. I kind of wish Tolkien had some criticism on some of the English stuff, but he didn't like it.
No, he didn't like it. Exactly.
He didn't like it, but he never sat down and probably read as much.
He did, and would get disgusted with it. So.
Well, it's glad that he's the unique person that he is.
Yes.
Or we would have never had fantasy as it is today.
It would be something different.
Yes. All right, I'm sorry, we'll get off track here.
No, that's what we're here for, the discussion.
I was brought up in the classics, so he's talking about like the Greeks, right?
Right.
And first discovered the sensation of the literary pleasure in Homer. Also being a philologist, getting a part of any aesthetic pleasure that I'm capable of from the form of words, and especially from the fresh association of word form with word sense. See, now he's talking about something I don't even know where he's going. I have always best enjoyed things in a foreign language, or one so remote as to feel like it is, such as Anglo-Saxon. But that is enough about me. So that's interesting to me, that he was more interested in what he calls the foreign things. I guess he wouldn't be very interested in stuff from the Renaissance, and he wasn't too big on, because he was very medievalist.
Well, he read the whole spectrum, and it's just what resonated for him.
I'm afraid it is only too likely to be true that what you say about the critics and the public, I am dreading the publication, for it will be impossible not to mind what is said. I've exposed my heart to be shot at. Sorry. If you know anything about writers, that's probably more true than you think.
Yep.
I think the publishers are very anxious too, and they are very keen that as many people as possible should read advanced copies and form a sort of opinion before the hack critics get busy. I'm just going to finish the letter.
Sure.
I was sorry to hear that you are now without a cello after having got some way, I'm told, with the lovely and difficult instrument. Anyone who can play a stringed instrument seems to me a wizard worthy of deep respect. I love music, but have no aptitude for it, and the effort spent on trying to teach me the fiddling youth have left me only with a feeling of awe in the presence of fiddlers. Slavonic languages are for me almost in the same category. I have had a go at many tongues in my time, but I am in no ordinary sense a linguist. And the time I once spent on trying to learn Serbian and Russian have left me with no practical results.
Interesting. He struggled with. I didn't know he struggled with the Slavonic stuff.
Only a strong impression of the structure and word that actually I can understand where he's coming from. Now I'm not obviously. Well, I've tried to read Slavonic stuff, and you know, when you're used to the Anglo-Saxon stuff, they seem to part ways anyways, and it's really hard to. Yeah, I think one is really harder to try once you're in. You've already learned one. The other one's a little bit harder.
Yeah, no, your second language is the toughest. After that, it gets a lot easier.
Please forgive the apparent unfriendliness of my type. My typing does not improve, except in speed. I am now much faster than with my laborious hand, which had to be spared as it is quickly gets tired and painful. I have no doubt that you will be hearing shortly from Edith. With much love to you, Ronald Tolkien. Wow. That is definitely interesting that he considered Rob, one of the few people that he kind of turned to for
the English side of things.
well, for criticism and
Yeah.
so on and so forth.
Respected it, yeah.
Yeah. I'm just trying to figure out, how old was Rob? Can you look that up? Was Rob in 53? How old was he? Because Murray started the Oxford English Dictionary like years in advance of Tolkien. Like, I don't remember, almost like a whole generation difference.
What's his full name?
Robert Murray. Father Robert Murray.
Murray or what?
Murray.
A-Y. Founder, Oxford Dictionary.
Yeah.
Financier. There's James Murray.
Right, James Murray is the one who started
Okay.
the Oxford English.
Robert
Dictionary.
Murray was a financier? No, that's wrong.
Father Robert Murray, it says.
That's a wrong, because Robert Murray, financier, was 1635 to 1725.
Yeah,
So
right
not associated with Oxford Dictionary so much. This is James Murray for Oxford Dictionary.
Right.
So I need more info.
This is grandson of Sir James Murray.
Okay,
The
so that's his
founder
son, yeah. Okay,
grandson.
yeah, it's the grandson, okay. Let's see, Robert Murray, Tolkien Gateway. Oh yeah, he was born June 1925, so he was pretty young.
Right. This is
English
53.
Roman Catholic theologian and grandson of Sir James Murray. On the faculty of Haythrop College in Oxfordshire and London since 1963. Became a Jesuit in 1949. Was ordained in 1959. Personal friend of the Tolkien family, a friendship which contributed to his conversion to Roman Catholicism since 1944. Murray was entrusted by J.R.R. Tolkien to proofread drafts and manuscripts of Lord of the Rings.
Wait a minute, conversion, what was that about conversion?
To Catholicism.
Oh, yeah, but who influenced who? Was Tolkien influenced by them? Is that what they're implying? That the family can help to convert? Because I thought he said something about his wife being involved. I mean, his mother. Sorry, Tolkien's mother. Didn't she convert to Catholicism? That's what it was.
On August 1st, 1959, Tolkien served Murray's first Mass, and on 6 September 1973, 4 days of the death of Tolkien, he assisted in a Requiem Mass for Tolkien in the Church of St. Anthony of Padua in Headington, Oxford. During the Tolkien Centenary Conference in 1992, Father Murray gave the sermon preach at the Thanksgiving service. So he became a Catholic because of Tolkien, is what it sounds like, a Jesuit.
Oh, okay. So that's what I was wondering.
Yeah. So you were wondering how old he was, what year is it?
1953.
Okay, he was born in 25, so 29 years old at the time.
It's pretty amazing that he respects him.
That Tolkien because Tolkien's in his 60s by then, right?
Well, not only that, but Tolkien, I mean, he's a kind fellow, but to get respect from Tolkien, I mean,
yeah, he was.
C.S. Lewis sometimes didn't get didn't get respect from Tolkien.
Yeah. No respect. Are you sure Brian was coming?
He said 2 o'clock. I'm not sure where he's at. Maybe he's not going to make it.
Bummer.
I apologize, but I thought that's what he said. That saddens me because I kind of wanted to hear him
do the rest
read
of his stuff.
Poetry, and I feel like this is a very empty room.
Yes, normally we have many more in here. We're missing Chris and Robert and
Well, and
Brian.
what's the name of the couple that's been coming?
Yeah.
I
those
can't think of her name.
Yeah, I forget the name right now, but yeah. So I'm missing all of them. Where are you all? Come back to us, please. Come back to Mordor. We will take you. Come back.
I was sent back. They come in shining like the sun.
All right. Well, letter 143 from a letter to Rainer Unwin, 22nd of January, 1954. I am sending now Book 3, first half of Volume 2, carefully corrected. Book 4 is nearly done and shall follow on Monday. I have also revised Volume 3 and can let you have the manuscript of that as far as the end of the story as soon as you wish. The matter for the extra 50 pages, footnote, I shall not be able to do just yet. I am not at all happy about the title The Two Towers. It must, if there is any real reference in it to Volume 2, refer to Orthanc and the Tower of Cirith Ungol. Enter! But since there is so much made of the basic composition of the Dark Tower and Minas Tirith, that seems very misleading. There is, of course, actually no real connecting link between Books 3 and 4 when cut off and presented separately as a volume. So this is about the Two Towers. He did not like the title, The Two Towers. And if there's any reference, it would, in Volume 2, refer to Orthanc and the Tower of Cirith Ungol. Mm. But, since there is much made of the basic composition of the Dark Tower and Minas Tirith, that seems very misleading.
So you, I don't mean to get us too far off,
no.
But he's come in.
Yes.
He has come.
Yes, at last.
We were discussing your poetic
prowess.
Your poetic prowess and your drinking habits.
Oh yes. You know what happens when you don't show up to a meeting on time. See what happens to you.
Not here to defend himself. Well. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Hail and well met.
Maya Govanen.
And thanks for taking care of the notes, reading those,
yep.
and all that. Yeah, so even smaller group than we thought.
Much.
I feel like a group.
We're a group of 3.
Like half of the... There you go.
Instead of a duo, we're now a trio.
Yes,
So
indeed.
So
what have you covered? So you're reading.
We read the first stanza of your Woodman poem.
Yep.
We read the first few stanzas of your old the adventure, the Warrior 6.
Oh my!
To show your other style there.
Thing.
Yeah, which did get a little notoriety with Francesco.
That meant a lot to me, actually. Yeah. For him to be just encouraged that the work, I'm sure that you think about how much work he's put into it, because the very beginning, the Marshmallow, of course, was one of the very first. Yeah. The published. At that point, they hadn't really received a lot of awards.
Yeah, they didn't know. Yeah.
So it's
because we were the first 75 adopters.
Right.
So we were really early in the.
Which is probably why we got a lot of hits on YouTube, simply because people were still discovering, and trying it out.
Exactly. And then we talked a little bit about our pub crawl and crawl.com and the evolution of that. We, of course, we did both. We went in and covered June's letters as well as July's letters.
Okay.
Notes. And I went ahead and sang from the Eves of Entwood.
Yes.
Or Eves of Mirkwood, excuse me.
He's kind of a poetry focus today.
He does. Yeah. Well, he did a very good job of it, because I wouldn't have been able to sing it as nicely as he did.
And you have to understand, it's a phobia of mine, so I'm trying to face it now. Singing in front of people, so I'm trying to make myself do it.
There you go.
It's extremely uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And then we read letters 141, and we were just finished 142, which is 143. So we read 142, which was to Robert Murray, grandson of Sir James Murray. And James Murray was founder of Oxford English Dictionary. And Robert Murray is a close friend of the Tolkien family. We looked it up on Tolkien Gateway. He was a much younger fellow at the time of this letter. He was 29, and Tolkien talked about respecting Rob in his viewpoints on his literature and criticism and on English literature and such. Even though he was only 29 years old.
Tolkien kind of admitted that he enjoyed the more exotic or foreign language.
And didn't really nourish, he said, I have not been nourished by English literature, in which I do not suppose I am better read than you, for the simple reason that I have not found much there in which to rest my heart.
Yeah.
It just didn't resonate.
So you recognize that other people might have just as much, facilities.
Yeah. And then so Rob was a very close member of close to his family.
Oh.
Apparently converted to Catholicism because of that friendship. Became a Jesuit priest.
Okay.
And then became Father Murray.
Oh wow! So, which letter is this?
142.
Okay.
And then, according to Tolkien Gateway, presided over a memorial for Tolkien and everything.
Wow! When he died.
4 days of the death of Tolkien, assisted in a requiem mass for Tolkien in the Church of St. Anthony of Padua in Headington, Oxford.
That's
and then in 1992 at
Tolkien
in 1992 Tolkien Centenary Conference, Father Murray gave the sermon preach at the Thanksgiving service. So.
Yeah, because he was younger than Tolkien, so...
Yeah, he was born 1925.
That's why we were amazed by how much respect he had.
I'm assuming he's passed away by now, but still there's a few people...
It just has the born...
I mean, he'd be in his 90s now, wouldn't he?
Yeah, it doesn't say that he's dead, it just says that's when he was born.
But it's interesting that the guy, the grandson of the guy who started the Oxford English Dictionary is close friends with Tolkien since... Tolkien worked on the last part of the
W's.
On the W's,
Wow. And so, what was the name of this guy again?
Robert Murray.
Robert Murray.
Robert Patrick Ruthven Murray.
Okay.
Murray.
All right. So he's a friend. Okay, got it. So are you guys done with that, or did you?
We finished that and we moved on to 143.
Okay.
And I just finished that as you walked in.
And now that was about the Two Towers. Was this to his Unwin again?
Yeah, that was to Unwin.
Okay.
And just giving an update on where he's sending now book 3.
Oh yes, because he was
volume 2.
posting off. He couldn't do all 3 earlier, so
right.
What was it? What did he want the name to be again instead of the Two Towers? What was it that he wanted it to be? I don't remember.
I thought in letter 140 or 141, it wasn't 141. It was 139 and 140. He had said something along the lines that the first and second one he accepted, because he was saying, well, if it was the Two Towers, I'm okay with that, I suppose. And it could be these, or it could be these towers. He gave kind of a number of different possibilities of what they could refer to, and he was fine with it being ambiguous. So at that point, in a couple of letters ago, maybe a year before, he was okay with it, but it was the Return of the King he didn't like. He didn't like the title of the Return of the King.
Yeah, he didn't like
because
the
it gave away.
either.
Because it gave away.
Yeah, he said, okay, I will read it because it's really short.
Okay.
143.
Right, he was saying.
I am sending now book 3, the first half of volume 2, carefully corrected. Book 4 is nearly done and shall follow on Monday. I have also revised volume 3 and can get you the manuscript of that as far as the end of the story as soon as you wish. The matter for the extra 50 pages footnote I shall not be able to do just yet. I am not at all happy about the title The Two Towers. It must, if there is any real reference in it to volume 2, refer to Orthanc and the Tower of Cirith But since there is so much made of the basic opposition of the Dark Tower and Minas Tirith, that seems very misleading. There is, of course, actually no real connecting link between books 3 and 4 when cut off and presented separately as a volume.
Right, because the title, book 4 would be about Smeagol or Frodo, Sam, and Smeagol, basically, right?
Yeah.
Can't remember the title, but it's along the lines. That seems really odd to me because I knew that, I mean, it wasn't what he'd come up with, but of course he was hoping for 6 volumes, but he was somewhat resigned. Let me see if I can find the quote to it, but he earlier seemed like he was willing to accept the possibility that maybe he would just have to go along with those titles, and I'm wondering if it's because at that point let's see here. See if I can find this. I think at that point, though, if I'm thinking correctly, he was just happy that they were willing to publish it because
Right.
he was starting to despair.
Well, he'd gone back and forth trying to
Oh, yeah.
to get his Silmarillion.
Okay, so let me just summarize this, making sure I've got the timing on this.
Maybe he just felt that arguing about the title was probably not as important as getting it published.
Well, I do think so. Yes. Okay, this is pretty key. This is letter 137 from back in I think May or June we read this. Just one moment here.
Oh, and then he brought some books we were holding off on discussing until you were here.
Okay.
Well, I didn't know because it is 6 pages long. I don't know if we could get it in.
We could always kind of put that on the docket for September, and that way we'll maybe have a chance to read it beforehand, which is sometimes nice to.
Well, and that was what I was thinking is leave it with either one of you. I don't know which one wants to take it, but they could read through it before we actually read it.
And I'll see Hawk again before our next meeting, so one of us could take a turn and pass it on. Okay, this is. Okay, in letter 136, this is 1953, March, he says, P.S. I have given some thought to the matter of subtitles for the volumes which you thought were desirable. But I do not find it easy as the books, though they must be grouped in pairs, are not really paired, and the middle pair 3 and 4 are not really related. Would it not do if the book titles were used, e.g. The Lord of the Rings, Volume 1, The Ring Sets Out, and The Ring Goes South, Volume 2, The Treason of Isengard, and The Ring Goes East, Volume 3, The War of the Ring and the End of the Third Age. If not, I can at the moment think of nothing better than 1, The Shadow Grows, 2, The Ring in the Shadow, 3, The War of the Ring, or The Return of the King. So that's in March of 1953.
Right, so.
And then he doesn't really refer to it in the next letter much. And then letter 139, he returns to it again. This is in August of the same year, 1953. And he says, Lord of the Rings is a good, he says, if I could have a back or a copy, it would help me. I am, however, opposed to having separate titles for each of the volumes and no overall title. The Lord of the Rings is a good overall title, I think, but it is not applicable especially to Volume 1. Indeed, it is probably least suited to that volume, except possibly in the matter of cost. I cannot see the objection to calling all of them Lord of the Rings, but Volume 1, The Return of the Shadow. Number 2, The Shadow Lengthens. Number 3, The Return of the King. And he just throws out different possibilities of how.
I thought he didn't like The Return of the King.
No, well, I thought that.
No, he doesn't. He threw that as other possibility. He preferred War of the Ring.
Yes.
Over The Return of the King.
Yes, but he's mentioned The Return of the King twice.
Yes.
In letter 140, he says, I now suggest as titles, this is also in August, I now suggest that as titles of the volumes under the overall title of Lord of the Rings, Volume 1, The Fellowship of the Ring, Volume 2, The Two Towers, Volume 3, The War of the Ring, or if you still prefer that, The Return of the King. Here he's suggesting The Two Towers.
Yeah. He just said he's not happy with it, even though he suggested it.
But he's not happy with his own work sometimes, so this
Yes.
might be part of it.
Yes.
He specifically says, listen to this, this is in letter 140. The Fellowship of the Ring will do, I think, and fits well with the fact that the last chapter of the volume is the breaking of the Fellowship. The Two Towers gets as near as possible to finding a title to cover the widely divergent books 3 and 4, and can be left ambiguous. It might refer to Isengard and Barad-dûr, or to Minas Tirith and Barad-dûr, or Isengard and Cirith Ungol. On reflection, I prefer for Volume 3 the War of the Ring, since it gets in the ring again and also is more non-committal and gives less hint about the turn of the story. The chapter titles have been chosen also to give away as little as possible in advance, but I am not set in my choice. So there you are.
Right. He didn't want the Return of the King because the Return of the King more or less gave away the ending of the book.
Right. I mean, he was saying that would at least be a pretty good summary of what it's really about. But what it's about and what you want the public to know are two different things.
Right.
You don't want to give away everything. But to me, this seems quite clear that he has actually said at one point that he was all right with the Two Towers being a satisfactory title.
And then he goes back and says, well, it seems a bit misleading.
Yeah. Well, because he doesn't really see anything in common between book 3 and book 4.
Right.
Which it's true. And where do most people, we've talked about this before, Hawk, right?
Yeah.
Most people, if they're seriously reading Lord of the Rings the first time, if they stop anywhere, it's usually the Two Towers.
Yep. Because all the travel and stuff.
All the travel, and it seems so like, it almost seems like two stories in there. And you're like, well, you don't really, okay, so where are, I mean, if you read to the end, you find out what happened to Pip and Merry.
Yeah.
But in the middle, you're just like, so they're kind of pursuing them, but you don't know what's going on. And maybe it does have, actually does have flashbacks. It does tell you what's going on with Merry and Pippin, but they haven't caught up yet.
Wait, is the Two Tower where it bounces back and forth between?
Yeah. Every chapter.
Actually, it's not every chapter.
Or no, not every chapter. Sorry, each volume. Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. What I'm saying is between Frodo and what's going on with Aragorn and the Hobbits.
If you're really invested in what's going on with Sam and Frodo, and you've just finished the Fellowship of the Ring, which, if I'm not mistaken, Shelob is in the book. Yes? I think Shelob. No, that's in the end of Two Towers.
Yeah, that's the end of.
So, but the Breaking the Fellowship is at the end of. No, I'm actually. I don't think
Breaking the Fellowship's the end of the Fellowship of the Ring, isn't it?
I thought the Breaking actually is the beginning of the Two Towers. Here,
well, it picks up from.
It picks up from that, but Boromir dies actually, I think, at the beginning of the Two Towers.
Oh, okay.
But in any case, you still have basically. It's the first half of the book completely doesn't follow Sam and Frodo. It follows what does the rest of the group do. Boromir dies, the hobbits are let off, and now you're really with Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas saying, what do we do? Do we follow Sam and Frodo, or do we try to rescue these hobbits to...
Right.
Right, and they decide to follow...
So the whole first half of the book is all about that. So if you're deeply invested in Sam and Frodo and like, oh yeah, the ring and all this, now all your hobbit characters are gone. So in a sense, the appeal of the hobbits, there's no hobbit characters in the first half.
Right.
And I think that's where a lot of people get bogged down.
Well, mostly what I've heard is all the travel. They get bored of the
It should have been named properly The Hiding of the Hobbits.
It's funny because I think different generations are, I don't know if I want to generalize too much here because people are all different, but I think there's different reasons for why people get bogged down.
Yeah.
And one of them is travel. I would say people who have the most difficulty with Tolkien's style.
Yeah.
And that heavily descriptive kind of style, which is really more common in the early, from a long while.
Well, Tolkien ignores the rule from, who's that Russian author, the famous Russian author who said, if there's a knife or a gun on the table, in the next chapter, you need to do something with it to resolve it.
In fact,
you don't put anything irrelevant to the story.
He goes completely against that.
Yeah, he does all the stuff which helps you have the legendarium and world for derivative stuff.
Well, there was a comment that was made, and maybe this isn't completely related, but somebody was pointing out that there's a difference between where the plot ends, where Frodo, the ring gets in the fire, and where the story really kind of continues after a specific point where the ring is at. And because in most normal stories you want the story to end about the same time as the plot, the plot ends essentially here, and then Tolkien doesn't really end the story until almost, the scouring of the Shire and so on and so forth. They
Yes,
say the reason why you don't do this in a lot of books is because it really makes it hard for the readers to sit through that
It
that
does.
last little bit.
But
I love the scouring of the Shire.
I was taught that all good literature has a denouement, the falling action. But I think the difference is that most falling action takes up one chapter, where it kind of ties up all the loose ends, right?
Right.
But you're right. If you talk about the destruction of the ring, yeah, that's
Tough act to follow.
It is. But when you look at what he says, well, the title of book 6 is the end of the Third Age. So you're right. So Hawk, what you're saying, he's always conceiving of this in the context of his invisible legendarium.
The big world, yeah.
And so he's thinking, oh my goodness, this is really the end and the beginning.
Yeah.
But everybody else is like, oh, what? Saruman escaped? And I think nowadays people might think, oh, he doesn't know when to stop. Whereas in reality, it's the farthest thing from the truth.
Right, because he has the big picture.
Yeah.
Well, I agree. I understand what you're saying, but I just think it's funny that Tolkien has the ability, because he's been through war, there's this decisive moment that the ring is destroyed, but nothing is completely accomplished at that moment. It's not like, the characters are teleported to...
How does it change the quality of the land? And like the fact that things
goes
back
into
to normal.
a very...
And of course,
very
linguistic changes.
Right, because he's dealt with war, and what happens when a war is over, it's not really over in the same
the scars
sense that,
remain on the land and on the people.
That's a really, really vital point, Corey, because thinking about World War I, which of course is what Tolkien was in.
Right.
In a sense, you could make an argument, maybe more for metaphor's sake, that World War I did not end on the 11th of November 1918.
Yeah, it didn't really get resolved.
But in some ways, you could say not until the poppies bloomed again the following spring. Like the poem In Flanders Field, it's this idea that until this carnage that's been left behind by war just begins to be healed. The land, of course, was, have you seen photographs of the trees? It's like, they look like sticks.
Right, and I understand what you're saying.
And I wonder if, in a way, that's kind of what he was thinking too.
Right, and I think that's, but when Peter Jackson, I don't think Peter Jackson, obviously he's not the best person for this, but when Peter Jackson did the movie, I think it's a really hard sell for a lot of people in modern mainstream movies nowadays to finish out the Lord of the Rings out to the very end of the Return of the King, because it's really hard for I don't know.
Yes, and I have to say this, even though in the main I am not a fan.
But I do like that he did the Grey Havens and everything.
Yes,
he did.
Yeah.
And when you talk about the Two Towers, truly, cinema is able to accomplish what Tolkien, just because the constraints of publishing, couldn't do. So, for example, you can go back and forth very well between what's going on with the hobbits. They're taking the hobbits to Isengard.
You just had to.
I know, I had to do that.
Stuck in my head.
I always feel like that is such a cheap shot. Like, how do they know they're going to Isengard? They're going in this general direction, but how do they know they're going to Isengard?
I don't think they did. I think because honestly, where were they? Where did the Rohirrim catch up to him? Right at the edges of Fangorn Forest. So how could you figure out that they were going to Isengard? You would accept that the orcs that were taking them, some of them were the ones with the white hand.
Right. Well, but I don't.
I agree with you. I think Peter Jackson, wasn't the best one to show up. And I would say, just a very quick aside, this is the same reason why very few people can do some of C.S. Lewis's works well. In my mind, is because there's a kingdom mindset, this idea of the restoration of a kingdom, or the undoing of wrongs.
Right.
Very dear to Lewis and Tolkien, both as Christians. So when you look at Prince Caspian, for example, it's been made into a movie. So-so. It was the least successful of the movies. Part of it is because when they vanquish the Telmarines, you know, King Miraz's side, you have Caspian gets back his throne. But there's this whole denouement where there's kind of this revelry because Aslan has come back, and what he's doing is it's like the Telmarines had kind of not only denied the reality of talking beasts and kind of said, you know, we're making a kingdom of men and we're doing away with all that nonsense and fighting it and saying it's the fairy tale, but they kind of have this just tableau of, you know, regimented kind of highly structured, very almost dictatorial kind of rule, even down to the level of the schoolroom, and just seeing how things were really holding back people from their true selves, from their true potential. And then when you have at the end of the Prince Caspian is that when Aslan comes back, Miraz is defeated, of course, and then you have really this undoing of wrongs whereby Aslan's magic and the Bacchanalian kind of, you know, all these dryads and fauns and whatever.
Right, everything's coming back to life.
Yeah, and you got the school teacher who's beating the boy, and the stick that he's beating the boy with turns into a flowering branch, and then the man turns into a tree and he's rooted to the ground.
What's this?
It's in the end of Prince Caspian.
Yeah, and see, but that's the difference between C.S. Lewis and Tolkien. When Tolkien was talking about the scars that were left over from
They're much more profound.
Sauron, it was, you know, the ring died. There were some things that did, but there were still huge portions of land that needed to be healed. There were
well, right.
You know, there were
the fact that the Shire could still be under any kind of evil domination still had to be defeated. We're used to kind of like it's all or nothing. Like, oh, the bad guy's fallen, everything's good now.
Yeah, the bad guy dies and the magic completely evaporates and everything's good again. You know.
But that only applied to the orcs or the beasts that were directly under his will, but not to the corrupt people who were, in a sense, within the Shire.
Well, even I would say that the orcs never were completely eliminated because they weren't technically Saurons to begin with.
True.
They were Melkors from the beginning.
Right.
And so the fact that they exist, I think that they eliminated a huge amount of goblins and orcs in that fight, and the Mordor broke open and there was
It was the organizing principle, not the life of the creatures themselves.
Right. Sauron was organizing them. Yeah.
That's a whole nother topic of its own. But you're right. There is a difference in degree, and maybe in that sense, Lewis is more hopeful. It's a little bit more and the size of his books, it's like that, right? It's much more, in a sense, a childlike story in which you would expect some of those fairy tales that suddenly it's like a bad dream. Although I have to say, Frodo, when he wakes up, he's not known the whole time, has he, that Gandalf survived. And so he says that wonderful line where he says, "Gandalf, you're alive." Well, you know, is it Frodo or Sam who says, "Will everything bad suddenly turn?" You know, and then.
But yeah, even though this was a moment that was looking ahead to the remaking of the world, there was still a matter of sorrow because even Arwen had to deal with the death of Aragorn later on, and she passed away in sorrow, and there's this idea that well yes, it was a moment of reflection of what was going to happen at the remaking of the world. It was still tainted with sorrow.
In that sense, you could say that Middle-earth is the story is much more otherworldly, or that it's got a much more worked out end, eschatology. It's end time. That there is this real sense in which we've won this time, but it won't be the last time that evil will rise up again, and it will almost overcome, and at the last moment, they'll be able to defeat it. But really, the only true
victory
will be at the very end. Yeah, Because even the elves say that, don't they? They say they've been fighting the long defeat.
Right.
Over all those years.
Well, and that's
I mean, Elrond had seen how many times where they. I mean, he was at the War of the Last Alliance.
Right.
Sauron's.
But Tolkien tinges everything. I mean, here Frodo has this wonderful thing. He ends up spending some time in the Shire, and he writes a book, and him and Sam get along. But then there's this moment where he has to leave to the Grey Havens, and Sam is like, "Where are you going? Why do you need to go?" Exactly, and that's you know, at the moment, you know, it's like it's beautiful because they talk about, oh, the blossoms are on the trees, the, you know, even the elf and the dwarf, they go and they go adventuring and exploring, and the reign of Aragorn is so amazing and
but
healed.
Sam, even though you're right, because when his wife finally, when Rosie finally passes away, and he's an old hobbit, Sam cannot stay in Middle-earth, and he takes the last ship over to Valinor, because there's a part of him that's missing because of Frodo, right? And because he carried the ring for a short time.
Because he carried the ring, I think, is actually what they did. But missing Frodo, yeah. I mean, that's what I'm saying is he says, here's a victory, here's what it tastes like, here's this moment, and what he's saying is it's a pale imitation because he can't describe it.
Right.
But he's saying he tinges it with this sadness, so that we know that it's not an absolute victory.
It's like a sweet sorrow. Yes.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, that's actually. I wonder if anybody's ever done a good academic study of sorrow as a theme and how Tolkien uses sorrow.
Well, I like Henry Newland's quote. He says, and I'd have to find it, but he essentially says that our life on Earth is short in expectation, and that every piece of joy is tinged with sadness, and it does so that it makes us want to reach for something beyond this world, because there's almost a sense of melancholy, wistful yearning, whatever you want to call it.
Lewis had that term, Sehnsucht. Right. This idea of longing. Why, when reading these northern myths, did he have this just desire for something other? And you know, part of it is because of the power of myth and story and legend to always make us think of something outside of ourselves. But I think you're right. There's something, you know, deeply human that transcends all, you know, individual cultures. That, you know, there's something more. There's something deeper that you were meant to be part of. And I think too, there's a sense in which the flip side of that would be more of an entitlement, that if you expect everything to be given to you, you have a diminishing amount of gratitude for when you do have something good happen. Whereas, I can't prove this, but I would just kind of venture that some of our favorite characters in The Lord of the Rings are those who are thankful when they can experience even something that to us might look small. You know, Sam's in Mordor and sees the clouds part just a little bit. He sees a star, and you know, it's just encouraging to him. Or they're in Ithilien and they've got some rabbits and they cook them up, and maybe it's just because hobbits really are encouraged by, quote, small comforts, and that kind of makes us think of ourselves. But, you know, you can only be a ranger or Dunedain for so long. You know, you have to. I think it's interesting that these two can be paired together, gratitude and sorrow, and that they're not mutually exclusive.
Well, I think that what's funny is everything that how do I put this? We have friends, obviously, and we have close friends, but the sin has always messed up our ability to have communion with one another.
That communication breaks up.
So even in the best relationships that we have on this earth, there's always going to be a sense of distance with one another, even though even in the best of friendships, I mean, think about Jesus and his apostles. I mean, what could be a better friendship than that? And yet Jesus felt so alone in his mission and the distance between him and his apostles. He was doing this amazingly beautiful thing, and yet, in the same sense, the distance was there. And what I'm trying to say is, even in this victory is a great thing. It was everything that they wanted, but even then, that victory was not absolutely, completely satisfying, because it still had the sorrow attached to it, because it was momentary.
Which is why the pursuit of that, in a sense, is almost greater than the finding of. You know what I mean? Because so often the finding of, or
thus enjoy the journey, not the destination.
Because when you get to the destination, you realize, like, all this has been to get me to this point, and then you realize what you still lack, or whatever.
Well, I like the comment that Bruce Lee made. I know it sounds weird to bring a Bruce Lee,
Bruce Lee's
but
all good.
But he said one time he said, it's like a finger pointing to the moon. He says, if you stare at the finger,
you'll miss all that.
You'll miss the heavenly glory. Okay, and that is essentially what is going on here. Is that this momentary greatness is pointing to something bigger. And the thing is if we try to hold on to this thing here, we're not realizing that this isn't the essence that we're getting.
Right.
That it's that.
But that's so hard, because I think it's such a dominant focus that to hold on to these things, or even, and this goes back to something Hawk said a couple, I don't know if it was 2 months ago or what, but the nature of evil in Middle Earth is to, I think this is maybe because of Michael Martinez' essay on gold and how gold can represent, anyway, but the idea that so the idea is control, and really controlling people and acquiring power or land or whatever material things is really, there's not much of a difference, because the same mentality is behind all of that. It is this seeking, this grasping and holding on, and so I think that's why Denethor, for example, despairs, because in a sense what's kept him going all this time is that he's been able to hold onto the borders of Gondor through all this bravery and honor and strength and fighting against the enemy, but now he sees that vision of just, it's so impossible.
We want immortality.
Right.
Okay, the sense of immortality. We have that feeling in us. I mean, that is what the scripture talks about. The sense of immortality, the sense that things are going to continue.
Well, there's something eternal in our hearts there.
Right. That wants that grasps that. And I think that grasping of immortality, Chesterton calls it an immortal moment. Is the idea is for a moment we experience the immortality of something.
Sure.
But and we try to grasp it and try to arrange for it and try to create it, but we can't do that because essentially it's a given thing. It's a gift. It's not something that we can obtain by manipulation or
well, friendship is a great example, like you were mentioning earlier. Friendship, like using the word gift is really good. A friendship like we have here, it's something that you have to nurture, and you have to, but it's never something that you can, I mean, when you start to use it, then it is it empties it of its lasting value, and I think that's the relationships and the fellowship, or the closest ones, like you said, there is that sense in which
the fellowship foci.
Yes. There's real benefit. There's a third thing. I know this is Did you ever read anything by the poet? What was the guy? Iron John.
Iron John, yeah, okay.
We talked about
Robert Bly.
Robert Bly.
Yeah.
He talked about love this way. Not to get off too far here, but he talked about love as like the third thing. So, and I would say friendship is kind of like this, just in a different version, where you have two people with a common interest, but it's not just a common interest. You really enjoy whatever it is. You feel more you because you're around that person.
I think that was C.S. Lewis, but okay.
Okay, well, we talked about that, and I think that with all good friendships, that is certainly the case. Well, and actually, Tolkien, if we're going to go on now, back to Tolkien, what did he say about, what was it?
C.S. Lewis always said that every friend helped to open up a specific facet of our personality that we didn't know that we had.
And when someone dies,
and when somebody dies,
you lose.
You kind of lose that. But the thing is our intimacy with one another, the desire for intimacy without any
right, overtones,
without anything, because we live in a sinful world.
It's not weird.
It's not really possible, and that desire is that we want that intimacy forever.
Right.
I mean, that's the reason why we get married to some extent. I mean, we want something that's going to persist. And immortality, this grasping at wanting to have something permanent that's never going to change.
Right.
That's really hard for us because of the people in our lives are a reflection of God, are a piece of God, I guess you could say, that pulls out parts of us that need that. Anyways, I'm not saying it's very good.
Change to some extent needs to be accepted.
Right.
How does one accept change or not completely try to control things, and at the same time not devalue things that really matter, and be stoic about it all?
Well,
that's the great challenge.
I think that sorrow and yearning is where we have to go, because the hard part is that if we don't have sorrow, if we don't have yearning involved in it, where we're aiming ourselves more or less in a specific direction, making ourselves hungry, allowing ourselves to be hungry instead of eating something that's going to diminish our desires. Our desires are these great things that we should chase, these dreams.
We see them as liabilities.
Right. The thing is we try to get into relationships or whatever to diminish this hunger. This hunger that we have, and we try to get all these earthly relationships and all these other things in this hunger. And I feel like the hunger that pushes us is good, but it's hard to stay hungry because it's painful for us to sit empty,
right.
not empty in a bad way, but empty in the sense of the fact that we're allowing the sorrow of dreams that are never going to be fully realized and things like that.
But that's where fantasy is so powerful, because if you can then enter into vicariously someone else's life story and their yearning or they are sorrowful, you can both experience it and yet not be wounded by it.
And then take that even deeper with role-playing gaming.
Yes. I would absolutely agree.
Right.
I mean, I think at its best, that's what it's really capable of.
Well, that's what one of the
right.
the essays. Just the fact is that when we're dealing with the desire, when we're stirring up human desire, and we realize that desire is never going to be fulfilled. C.S. Lewis puts that. That's hard for us to really sit and allow ourselves to be like the bride, in Song of Solomon, who's walking along the top of the tower waiting for her husband to come home, and she's constantly asking, the watchman, have you seen my husband? Have you seen my husband?
Right.
And being open to that instead of being like, oh, well, turning into bitterness or despair and being like, oh, he's never coming home, so I'm just gonna turn to I'm gonna ask the watchman to come to my house, and we're gonna.
Or you're with Sam and Frodo in Mordor, and you're imagining home,
Right.
and the smell of strawberries, and that, I mean, that helps you persevere.
Right.
That yearning can actually help you look beyond your circumstances to something greater. So anyway, it's about
Depending on the person's character.
This is true.
Well, I'm sorry. I think
We
we got too far off
No,
and
no,
maybe
no,
a little
this is
theological.
No, this
This is
was
very
okay
good.
to the
We'll just have to
discussion, so.
continue it next month, I think.
Well, I'm just, I don't know. I spend a lot of time listening to melancholy music, and but the thing
You
is,
should listen to most of my albums.
You're in good company here, Corey.
you guys know what the concept of mono
Monoaural. Monoaural.
No.
Just with binaural. No.
Anyways, it's the Japanese word for slowly weeping. Anyways, it's a very specific type of art about how you deal in sorrow with this transitionary nature of life.
Could you just maybe next meeting kind of give a little short explanation of that? Because I think that'd be really interesting to explore, especially any connections we can make with Tolkien.
Well, I will try.
Maybe you could bring us the word so we can enter into the notes, because I'm not great on Japanese.
Okay, well, I'll try to remember.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah, it's and like you said, I don't know which one of you wants to read the.
Well, so we can start, or you've got.
Well, we're almost done, aren't we?
We are. Now, Law had the letter.
Yeah,
Is it here?
It's six pages though.
Where is that in? Is it in the book or what?
It's in here. Yeah.
Okay, so what I could do is I can make a photocopy, and then I can just give it to Hawk later.
Okay, that's fine.
If you want.
No photocopies.
Oh yes.
No photocopies.
No photocopies.
Oh, yeah.
Why don't we just share the book?
Yes.
Okay,
you want to give it to Hawk?
Acceptable to do.
Give it to
Yeah.
Hawk. He can read it first.
If he wants to read, not right now, but
Well, that's fine. And then halfway through the, because then I can borrow from him. And
Okay.
it's in Lawhead, who is a fantasy author in his own right. Is he referring to the effect that Tolkien has had on him?
right. The
I mean, don't feel like you need to explain the whole thing, but
just
is that the connection?
the essay is just about his encounter with Tolkien, not that he's a scholar of any sort. He
Right.
actually says that in his essay that he's not much of
He's a great
Tolkien.
writer. I mean, I did like his
And he does live in Oxford.
Song of Albion. I mean, that was really good reading.
Oh, okay.
And Taliesin and some of his Arthurian work as well. By the way, before we finish,
I'm sorry.
there was Corey. You don't need to apologize about anything.
Okay.
That's all relevant. I was going to ask, did anybody pick up on Robert Hardy passing away last month?
Who's
last
Robert
month?
Hardy?
So he did Siegfried on All Creatures Great and Small, the TV show, the BBC one with James Herriot, the veterinarian. But he also played one of the professors in Harry Potter. But he's an actor, but he actually had both Lewis and Tolkien as professors at Oxford.
Wow.
And he was interviewed about that, and so he talks about it. So I thought maybe we could pick up on this next
That would be great.
month.
Yeah.
So we'll get onto
Put
that.
in the notes as a reminder.
We'll do, and then we can also respond to Lawhead's letter as well. Okay.
Very cool.
If with 6 pages, I don't know, is that longer? That's not as long as the
we can. No, it's not that long.
Okay, I just don't want us to take up a huge amount of time
That
with
goes
one
Well, we
letter.
don't have to read it out loud next week. Or next month. We can just
Read.
read portions of it or whatever. And if some of
Well,
us
it's
are
probably good if Hawk looks at it as to what portions he finds more interesting, because I don't know if I would necessarily know. It would be good.
Well, that's good though. It's really important to realize that while Tolkien is certainly not the how is it? He's not the pioneer. He's not the one who started everything, but he's a very important link between today's fantasy scene and what we know, and role playing, as you pointed out, and the past. And there's some very specific things that of course, without Tolkien, it may not, like Beowulf, one could argue that it wouldn't have the popularity it does today. But in terms of
Beowulf, definitely.
About authors and his influence on authors specifically, not in just some kind of generic elf dwarf kind of way,
right?
But on specific authors, I think it'd be great to see. That might even be a fun thing to do from time to time, is to pick up on different people who really acknowledge a debt there.
Well, Tolkien in some ways is a very narrow. He's the narrow bridge between mythology and modern day fantasy. There's not a whole lot of people that really wrote in that, maybe a little bit of McDonald, maybe,
right.
But I don't really know that there were many in that ever wrote. There were, maybe 4 or 5 people in all of history that kind of were the bridge between mythology and.
So for next time, we'll look at the Lawhead letter. What was there's a word there, the Japanese word.
Mono Aware. Yeah, A-W-A-R-E. A-W-A-R-E.
Okay. And then also we were going to talk about something else. What was it?
Were we gonna?
Robert Hardy.
Robert Hardy.
So I think we're good at this point.
No, I don't know what you guys want to do. This is.
You
Yes.
want to talk about.
What did I mention?
I'm.
For September. I can't remember now. I guess I just said that.
Well, it'll be on the video.
It will. I'll look at the notes. I'll look over this and make sure I'm ready.
The only
Last comment before we finish.
Right. A very rare Clyde Kilby essay. He was professor at Wheaton, very well known for.
And a student of, I think, Lewis's.
Yes, and I have his essay on mythic stuff in Tolkien. Now, we don't have to do it next month. We could push it to October for all I care, but if you think that would be appropriate, that's another possibility. It's up to you guys to make the decision. I have no problem.
No, that's good.
We're all peers in the discussion.
Well, I understand, but I don't want to push out other stuff.
Right.
Yeah, we want.
Thank you
no,
for that.
we want that. We want everybody to.
Thanks for being respectful that way. It's
Yeah.
good to have material to kind of plan the next couple months, and really, I think it'd be good to try to just, and I'll do my best to get the notes earlier to Hawk.
help promote.
Yeah,
because I didn't get a chance to.
No, August is kind of a difficult month.
Yeah, I understand.
But if we can get things going, I mean, we've had up to like 7 people
Yeah.
last spring, and if we can, get maybe Wes and
Well,
Steph.
25 we include Tolkien.
Well, this is true. Yes, always once a year. That's a nice crowd.
Captive audience.
All right, I think we're ready.
You haven't been using the flashy thing on anybody, have you? No, go ahead.
Flashy thing.
Men in black.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. Remember, we meet on the third Saturday of each month from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. Pacific time. Our notes and other info are at tolkienscholars.org. Our YouTube channel is youtube.com/Tolkien Scholars. You can check out our convention on youtube.com/Tolkien Moot for the streams, and the website tolkienmoot.org. We're on Twitter under Tolkien Scholars, Google Plus under Tolkien Scholars. Though we have a Facebook account, we don't really use it, but it is there. We prefer Twitter and YouTube and our own websites. You're welcome to post on the sites and the forums, etc. We welcome you. And we would welcome your comments on this video so we can comment. We follow up on them the next month. And wherever you may be well. Namarie.
Namarie.